The discovery the derelict facility hung like a metallic tumor against the backdrop of the collapsed star, its gravitational pull creating a dance of debris and shadow. Elias Cormac adjusted his environmental suit's headlamp, the beam cutting through the perpetual twilight of the lower maintenance levels. The human salvage crew had been contracted by the Galactic Restoration Consortium, apparently. Even in a universe full of advanced civilizations, nobody fixed broken things quite like humans. Cormac, you getting anything down there? Captain. Murphy's voice crackled through the comm system, distorted by the facility's electromagnetic interference. Just more empty corridors and dust older than Earth's pyramids, Elias replied, his boots echoing in the vast chamber. The architecture was distinctly non-human flowing curves that seemed to pulse with dormant energy, walls that shifted color depending on the angle of observation. 3 days into the expedition, and they'd found nothing but abandoned research. Labs and storage bays. The facility's original purpose remained a mystery, though the quantum signature suggested it predated most known civilizations by millennia. Elias had volunteered for the deep survey because he'd always been drawn to puzzles, and this place was the ultimate enigma. His scanner detected an anomaly behind what appeared to be a solid wall. Running his hands along the surface, he found a hidden scene that responded to pressure, revealing a chamber that had been sealed for centuries. The air inside was stale but breathable, filled with a low, almost subsonic hum that seemed to resonate. In his bones dot, at the chamber's center, stood a cylindrical containment pod, its surface covered in symbols that shifted and writhed like living things. Frost crystals had formed along its base, and energy readings spiked whenever he approached. Inside, barely visible through the translucent material, was a humanoid figure encased in what looked like liquid metal armor. Murphy, I've found something. Sending you the feed now. The figure was female, roughly human-sized, but with proportions that suggested otherworldly grace. The armor wasn't just covering her. It seemed fused with her skin, flowing and shifting like mercury. Her face was partially visible through a transparent section, revealing features that were hauntingly beautiful despite their alien nature. Cormac, get away from that thing. We don't know what. The communication cut out as Elias approached the pod. Something about the figure drew him forward, past caution and protocol. She looked so still, so trapped. Without thinking, he reached out and touched the pod's surface. The moment his palm made contact, the entire chamber filled with blinding light, and the humming rose to a crescendo that made his teeth ache. The pod began to crack. The awakening the containment vessel split open like a flower blooming in reverse, releasing a cascade of luminescent fluid that pooled on the chamber floor. The figure inside, no longer motionless, drew her first breath in what could have been centuries. Her eyes snapped open, revealing irises that glowed with an inner fire the color of amethyst. Elias stepped back, his heart hammering against his ribs. The woman's armor was shifting, flowing like living quicksilver across her skin. She tried to speak, but only a harsh mechanical sound emerged from her throat. Her eyes, wide with what looked like panic, fixed on his face. Easy, Elias said, raising his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. I'm not going to hurt you. She attempted to stand, but stumbled, her legs apparently unused to supporting her weight. Elias moved instinctively to catch her, his hand closing around her armored forearm. The moment their skin made contact, his palm, touching a gap in the metallic coating, something extraordinary happened. The armor began to dissolve. Starting from the point of contact, the metal flowed away like morning mist, revealing skin underneath. That was the color of twilight violets. Where the armor had been rigid and cold, her flesh was warm and soft. She gasped, staring at her newly exposed arm as if seeing it for the first time. What is this? The words came out imperfect, if archaic, galactic standard, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "You're free," Elias said, though. He wasn't entirely sure what he meant by that. More of the armor was dissolving now, retreating from her shoulders and torso. Elias quickly averted his eyes and shrugged out of his jacket, offering it to her. She took it with trembling hands, her fingers exploring the fabric with wonder. "I can feel," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "The texture, the warmth. I had forgotten such things existed. Who are you?" Elias asked gently. "I was Nixara of the Obsidian caste. But that name? It feels like a dream now." She looked at her hands, flexing her fingers. "We were the Emperor's guardians, bound, from birth in the living armor. Never to touch, never to feel, never to speak unless commanded. We were weapons, not people." The chamber suddenly filled with a low, pulsing alarm. Red lights began flashing along the walls, and the symbols on the pod's surface started glowing brighter. "What's happening?" Elias demanded. Nixara's expression hardened. "The awakening protocols. The Empire knows I'm free." She grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "You don't understand what you've done. By touching me, by breaking the binding, you've marked yourself as a target. They will come for both of us." The facility shuddered around them, and distant. Explosions echoed through the corridors. "Then we better get out of here," Elias said, taking her hand. "Can you run?" She nodded, her eyes blazing with determination. "I can do more than that. I can fight." The hunt begins. The facility's corridors had transformed into a maze of emergency lighting and blaring alarms. Elias led Nixara through the winding passages, his knowledge of the layout their only advantage as the ancient structure came alive. Around them, blast doors sealed themselves, forcing them to take increasingly narrow maintenance shafts. "The armor," Nixara explained as they crawled through a ventilation tunnel. "It wasn't just protection. It was a prison. The Obsidian caste were created to serve the Shadow Empire warriors who could never question, never rebel, because we could never truly feel or think for ourselves." Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew closer. Whatever had responded to the awakening protocols moved with mechanical precision, their footsteps echoing in perfect synchronization. "How long were you in there?" Elias asked, helping her down from the tunnel into another corridor. "Time ... no meaning. Centuries, perhaps millennia. I remember being sealed away when the Empire fell, a precaution against our potential rebellion. They feared us, even bound as we were." They reached a junction where Elias had to check his scanner to determine their route. The readings were chaotic energy signatures spiking throughout the facility as dormant systems activated. Through the walls, they could hear the hum of massive machinery coming online. "The entire facility is waking up," Nixara said, her enhanced senses picking up sounds Elias couldn't detect. "It's not just a research station, it's a fortress. A prison designed to hold my kind." The corridor ahead exploded in a shower of sparks and debris. Through the smoke stepped figures that made Elias's blood run cold. They were similar to Nixara in build, but their armor was intact, flowing across their bodies like liquid shadow. Their faces were hidden behind featureless masks, and they moved with inhuman coordination. "Sentinels," Nixara breathed. "They never removed their armor completely, the Empire's failsafe." The lead sentinel raised its arm, and energy crackled between its fingers. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of grinding metal. "Nixara of the Obsidian caste, you will return to containment. The contamination will be cleansed." "I won't go back," Nixara said, stepping protectively in front of Elias. "I remember what it felt like to be human, to be alive. I won't give that up." The sentinel's head tilted. "The flesh creature has corrupted your programming. This will be corrected." Elias watched in amazement as Nixara's body began to change. Without the constraining armor, her natural abilities were unleashed. Her skin took on a metallic sheen. Her movements became fluid and impossibly fast. She launched herself at the Sentinels with a grace that defied physics. The battle was brutal and brief. Nyxara fought with a ferocity born of newfound freedom, her bare hands tearing through armor that should have been impenetrable. But there were too many of them, and more were coming. "This way," Elias shouted, finding an emergency access panel. As Nyxara dispatched the last sentinel, he managed to override the door controls. They burst into the main hangar bay where the human salvage ship waited. But their escape route was blocked by a figure that made even Nyxara hesitate. Standing before their ship was another warrior, but this one was different. Her armor was golden, more ornate, and her presence radiated authority. "Hello, sister," the newcomer said, her voice carrying the weight of eons. "I am Zifara, High Sentinel of the Obsidian caste. You will submit, or the human dies." Bonds of steel and Fleshifara's golden armor caught the hangar's emergency lighting, casting shifting patterns across the walls like liquid fire. Unlike the other sentinels, she radiated an intelligence that was distinctly her own, though still bound by the ancient protocols that had shaped their existence. "You remember me, don't you, Nyxara?" Zephyr's voice held a note of something that might have been sadness. "We were forged in the same fires, trained in the same halls. You were my battle sister before the sealing." "I remember," Nyxara replied, her stance defensive but not aggressive. "I remember how you tried to comfort me when they first bound us in the armor. How you would stand closer during the ceremonies, so I wouldn't feel so alone." Elias watched the exchange with growing understanding. These weren't just soldiers. They were people who had been robbed of their humanity, their connections to each other severed by the very armor that gave them power. "Then you understand why I must bring you back," Zephyra said. "The Empire may have fallen, but the protocols remain. You are compromised, sister. The flesh creature has infected you with ... emotions." She spoke the word like a curse. "His name is Elias," Nyxara said firmly, "and he didn't infect me with anything. He freed me from the infection of the armor, from the poison of our binding." Zephyr's helmet retracted, revealing a face that was strikingly similar to Nyxara's, but where Nyxara's eyes now blazed with life, Zephyr's remained cold and distant. "Look at yourself, sister. You're weak, vulnerable. You feel pain now, don't you? Fear? These are not gifts, they are curses." "They are what make us alive," Nyxara countered. "Zephyra, I can touch things now. I can feel the texture of fabric, the warmth of sunlight, the tenderness of another person's skin." She glanced at Elias, and he saw something in her expression that made his heart skip. "I can offer you the same freedom," Nyxara continued. "You don't have to remain bound." For a moment, Zephyra's composure cracked. "You think I haven't dreamed of such things? For millennia, I've wondered what it would feel like to be touched with kindness instead of only violence. But dreams are dangerous, sister. They lead to chaos." Elias stepped forward, ignoring the energy weapons that immediately focused on him. "Maybe chaos is better than this," he said. "Maybe feeling pain is worth it if you can also feel joy." Zephyra's golden armor began to shift, and for a moment, Elias thought she might actually consider his words. But then alarms began blaring throughout the facility, and the hangar bay filled with the sound of approaching ships. "The Empire's descendants have arrived," Zephyra said. "They may have fallen from their former glory, but they still remember the old ways. They've come to reclaim what was lost." Through the hangar's massive viewport, Elias could see sleek vessels emerging from hyperspace, their hulls bearing symbols that hurt to look at directly. The Shadow Empire's remnants had indeed come calling. "You have a choice, sister," Zephyra said, her armor sealing again. "Return to containment willingly, and the human will be granted a quick death. Resist, and you will both suffer fates far worse than mere oblivion. Nyxara took Elias's hand, her fingers intertwining with his. The simple gesture sent a shock through both of them, not just the physical contact, but the emotional connection it represented. I choose freedom, Nyxara said, even if it means fighting the entire galaxy. Zephyra's shoulders sagged slightly. Then I am sorry, sister, but I must follow the protocols. The golden warrior raised her hand, energy crackling between her fingers. But as she did, her gaze fell on their joined hands, and something flickered in her eyes, a memory, perhaps, of what it might feel like to reach out and touch another soul. The hesitation lasted only a moment, but it was enough. The touch of freedom, the moment of Zephyra's hesitation, was all Nyxara needed. She moved with inhuman speed, but instead of attacking, she did something that stunned everyone in the hangar. She reached out and touched Zephyra's exposed wrist, just below the edge of her golden armor. The effect was immediate and profound. Zephyra's armor began to dissolve at the point of contact, spreading like ripples in a pond. The High Sentinel staggered, her eyes widening in shock. A sensation she had forgotten for millennia flooded through her nervous system. What? What? Have you done? Zephyra whispered, staring at her bare hand as if it belonged to someone else. I've given you back yourself, Nyxara replied, her voice gentle but urgent. Now we need to go. The Empire's ships are almost here. But Zephyra was transfixed, touching her own face with trembling fingers. I can feel everything. The air currents, the temperature, the vibrations in the floor. It's overwhelming. Elias had already reached the salvage ship and was firing up the engines. We need to move now, he shouted over the roar of the propulsion systems. The hangar bay suddenly filled with the sound of energy weapons charging. A squad of Imperial remnant soldiers had boarded the facility, their leader a tall figure in ornate battle armor that bore the scars of countless conflicts. Commander Voss, Zephyra said, her voice carrying a mixture of recognition and disgust. Still playing with toys too dangerous for you to understand. Voss removed his helmet, revealing a face that was pale and augmented with cybernetic enhancements. High Sentinel Zephyra, you will return the escaped asset to containment immediately. The Obsidian Cast project must be preserved. The project is finished, Zephyra said, standing slowly. Without her armor, she looked smaller, more vulnerable, but also more human. We are not assets, Commander. We are people. You are weapons, Voss snapped. Weapons created to serve the Empire's glory. You will not be allowed to corrupt the galaxy with your emotions. Elias had the ship ready, but the Imperial forces were blocking their path. He looked at Nyxara, who nodded with understanding. They would have to fight their way out, but as the first shots were fired, something unexpected happened. Other containment pods throughout the facility began to crack and open, responding to some chain reaction triggered by the awakening of the two sisters. Ancient warriors who had been sealed for millennia were stirring, and the touch of freedom was spreading like wildfire. You cannot stop what has begun, Nyxara called out to Voss as she and Zephyra fought side by side, their combined abilities overwhelming the Imperial forces. For too long we have been your silent weapons. Now we choose to be loud. The battle was fierce but brief. The newly awakened Obsidian Cast warriors, experiencing freedom for the first time, fought with a desperate ferocity that the Imperial remnants couldn't match. Commander Voss and his surviving forces retreated to their ships, but not before Voss delivered a final warning. This is not over, he transmitted as his fleet jumped to hyperspace. The Empire will return, and when it does, you will remember why you are caged. As the facility quieted around them, Elias found himself surrounded by dozens of alien warriors, all of them looking at him with a mixture of gratitude and wonder. He was the first being in their memory to offer kindness instead of command. What happens now? He asked Nixara, who was helping her newly freed brothers and sisters adapt to their first sensations of touch and warmth. Now we learn, she said, taking his hand again. We learn what it means to be free, to choose our own path, to touch and be touched with love instead of violence. Zephyra approached them, her movements still uncertain without her armor. The galaxy will not understand us, she said. We are strangers to our own bodies, our own hearts. Then we'll figure it out together, Elias replied. All of us. That's what being human means, learning as you go, making mistakes, growing stronger. Through connection. As their salvage ship carried them away from the facility, Elias looked back at the structure that had been both prison and sanctuary. In the span of a few hours, he had helped unleash a force that would reshape the galaxy, not through conquest or destruction, but through the simple revolutionary act of showing that even the most hardened weapons of war could learn to love. Squeezed his hand, and he felt the promise of adventures yet to come, of a future where the touch of freedom would spread to every corner of the stars. The age of the silent weapons was over. The age of the singing warriors had begun.